All right, it's the end of the 4:40 p.m. turn, and once again, very heavy cavalry action all across the field. In fact, the French spent all of their activations on cavalry, heavy and cavalry, all over the place. Apart from the Imperial Guard Corps activation, there were no other infantry activations among the French. Over on the left here, there's a shifting to the east of all of these forces. The Dutch Belgians continue to try to move their way to the east, but the French heavies in the centre there have begun to punch their way through and threaten the flanks of that first corps line around Hougoumont. Again, no infantry activations here. This is just the cavalry doing all the work in and around here. Light cavalry charges, heavy cavalry charges. A lot of the cavalry, the heavies, are still available. They've moved up, and these two in the middle there haven't charged yet. They're available to charge again next turn, possibly. The Allied cavalry in the centre here didn't activate, so things were pretty quiet around the centre here. None of Lebeau's routed men rallied, so they looked to be way out of the fight at this stage. This Sixth Corps has just been a disaster from the start, suffering from light cavalry charges early, this artillery response, and then the heavies without really doing much. You may recall very early on in the day their role was just to occupy this centre ground here, which they did, and they stood and just have been hit by wave after wave of Allied assaults. Now, around La Haye Saint, the Allies have just rearranged their defences a little bit. Brunswickers are now moving up into the line in the centre. Some more stragglers are returning to the field. You can see some Nassauers in the centre there. A few French units were eliminated in their fighting against these foot regiments, British foot regiments out in the west. The British lost some artillery pieces, but this is where a lot of the action was this turn, out on this eastern side of the Allied line defending that hill. This was massive cavalry action out here. They forced much of the British force, the Allied forces, Nassauers mainly in this area, off the heights. There are a few remaining, you can see, but this is a combination of the Guard light cavalry, French cuirassiers, heavy cavalry, and some lancers, all working together through various activations to just destroy that eastern side of the Allied line. Allied light cavalry is also activating and trying to respond, but actually there's still some Allied heavy cavalry behind the lines. It's just going to be difficult to activate them. They're there, you can see them waiting behind, but in the meantime their frontline infantry is being rolled up and destroyed. You can see behind the lines there some previously routed Prussian cavalry are coming in to help as well. But things looking good for the French over here. The assaults didn't quite go as well as they would have hoped, but you can see not all of a small number of these cavalry units have charged, and there are still a lot to help in the following turn. Some more light skirmishing over here between the Guard and the Prussians. The French guns getting to action out on the right there and really hurting the Prussian cavalry, scaring them away from that right flank. I think the Prussians caused one hit amongst the French Guard out on the left there, and in response they've suffered some very heavy casualties before even getting too close to the French. The Prussians, again, their morale is very low. They don't hit very hard. I think they have a fire attack value of 5 on the reverse side of their counter. It's difficult for them to get into line formation. They prefer columns, and they just don't have the hitting power to do much against these well defended Imperial Guard units. Again, looking behind the line, this is more a 4th Corps arriving behind Blucher there, and Purchase 2nd Corps still very slowly making their way on to the field of battle. Now, of course, it's the end of the hour, so I'm going to do a morale check just now. Alright, so here's the order of battle, and you can see those very heavy Guards losses amongst the British there. A scattering of losses around elsewhere as well. The Dutch Belgians, some 2nd Corps losses. King's German Legion have lost heavily as well in both 1st Corps and 2nd Corps. You can see up here and over here. And in contrast, you can see Lebeau's 6th Corps has suffered heavily, their artillery in particular, but otherwise the French are doing pretty well. Now this brings the total British losses to 12 amongst the Guards and some foot units over in the Reserve Corps. And that brings them to morale level 12, which will give them a negative morale modifier on all of their rolls. That isn't too much of a concern in itself. The main concern here is that 6 more British losses will bring them to level 3. And if that happens, all the Dutch and Belgian allies immediately rout. Now, having said that, the remaining British units are looking pretty well. The problem here with, I guess, the 3rd Division of the 1st Corps, they may need to pull back, but these foot units from the 5th and the 6th Division of the Reserve Corps are very strong and doing very well. I think the key is going to be what the Allies do, how they respond to this. They do have some cavalry behind the lines here. They're going to have to activate those and send them in to stop the French. So it's, as I said, end of the 4:40 p.m. turn, right at the start of the 5 p.m. turn, and this is really coming to a close. Well, coming to, the pointy end of the battle. Things are really happening around this end of the line. Losses are piling up. The Guards are pretty happy where they are. The Prussians are scared. And we'll see what happens over the next hour or so.